From brothel to battleship. In the dawn hours of 1809, as imperial warships closed in from three directions, Zheng Yi Sao stood unflinching on the deck of her flagship. The former brothel girl, now commander of history's largest pirate armada, had outmaneuvered the Qing dynasty for years. Where others saw a doomed last stand, she saw the chessboard with perfect clarity. By sundown, her enemies would be scattered, her legend cemented. The South China Sea had seen tyrants and admirals come and go, but never had it witnessed such audacity. A woman who commanded 70,000 pirates and 1,800 vessels, who had transformed from a Canton prostitute to the most feared maritime warlord in history, whose tactical brilliance would humble emperors and colonial powers alike. Her story defies everything we think we know about power, gender, and the forgotten architects of history. The Pearl River Delta. The Guangdong coast of 1775 was a place where empires collided and fortunes vanished like morning mist. Here, amid the swampy inlets and rocky harbors of the Pearl River Delta, a girl was born, whose name history would try to forget. We know almost nothing of her childhood, not her birth name nor her parents' fate, only that by 16 she had learned the bitter calculus of survival that governed women's lives under the Qing dynasty. While imperial poets composed delicate verses in Beijing's Forbidden City, she navigated the floating brothels of Canton's harbor, where European merchants and Chinese smugglers struck deals between cups of rice wine. The floating brothels, wooden rafts lashed together into sprawling complexes, provided one of the few paths available to a woman with neither family connections nor bound feet. Here, she developed an uncanny talent for reading men's ambitions and insecurities, skills that would later shape her command of thousands. Canton Harbor teemed with ships from across the world, Dutch traders, Portuguese gunboats, British East Indiamen, but it was the squat, weathered junks of the pirates that caught her eye. These vessels slipped in and out of the Delta's countless hidden channels, defying imperial edicts and flaunting their plunder. Among the most notorious captains was Jung Yi, commander of the formidable Red Flag Fleet. Unlike the drunken brawlers from lesser crews, Zheng Yi carried himself with the calculating air of a businessman. When he visited her brothel in 1801, he saw something in the young woman that others had missed. Their conversation, overheard by a Portuguese trader who later recorded it in his journal, hinted at her extraordinary future. "You manage these men and take their silver while keeping your freedom," Jung Yi reportedly said. "Join me, and we'll take the silver from every ship in the China Sea." Her answer changed maritime history forever. Marriage to Jung Yi. Their wedding took place at sea, officiated by a renegade Taoist priest under a blood-red sunset. The ceremony itself, recorded in fragmentary accounts by a captured Portuguese clerk, broke with every tradition of Qing dynasty marriages. The bride, who would now be known as Zheng Yi Sao, or wife of Zheng Yi, negotiated terms that would have shocked imperial courtiers: equal share in the pirate fleet's plunder, direct command of several ships, and control over the fleet's finances. She did not bow or promise obedience. Instead, Zheng Yi offered her something no brothel madam or merchant husband could provide: power without borders. The Red Flag Fleet that Zheng Yi Sao joined in 1801 was already formidable, controlling key shipping lanes between Canton and Vietnam. But under her influence, it transformed from a haphazard collection of raiders into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. While Zheng Yi led boarding parties and intimidated coastal villages, she introduced organizational systems that maximized profits and minimized unnecessary violence. "The Cantonese woman keeps records like a Mandarin tax collector," complained one frustrated Qing naval commander whose reports survive in Beijing's imperial archives. She established sophisticated logistics networks, developed intelligence-gathering operations in every port, and cultivated informants among imperial bureaucrats who could be bribed or blackmailed. Each raid, each protection scheme, each smuggling route now operated with ruthless efficiency. When pirates captured civilians, she personally sorted them. Wealthy merchants held for ransom. Skilled craftsmen offered positions in the fleet. Others released after paying a sailing tax that was carefully recorded in ledgers kept in her cabin. By 1804, the Pirate Confederation had expanded to over 400 vessels and controlled most of the shipping lanes from Macau to Hainan Island. The brothel girl had become a maritime strategist whose name whispered in harbors from Singapore to Shanghai inspired either terror or admiration, often both. The Red Flag Fleet rises. Zheng Yi's death in the typhoon of 1807 came with no warning. His body washed ashore near Macau, leaving his widow at the precipice of disaster. Within hours, ambitious captains began plotting to seize control of the Red Flag Fleet. According to accounts from a Portuguese trader captured during this period, 3 separate pirate lords approached her quarters that night with armed men. None left alive. At dawn, she summoned the fleet's captains to her flagship and issued a stark challenge. You may accept my command and prosper, or refuse and die where you stand. Her audacity stunned them, a former prostitute claiming the mantle of leadership over hardened pirates. But the ledgers in her cabin contained secrets that could destroy them all. She knew which captains had skimmed profits, which had hidden prize ships, which had made private deals with Qing officials. When she finished speaking, her late husband's adopted son, Chang Pao, stepped forward to pledge his loyalty. The others, seeing no better option, followed suit. Within months, she had transformed the Confederation into something unprecedented. A disciplined pirate armada governed by a strict code. The regulations she imposed, preserved in fragments through colonial records, were revolutionary and brutally enforced. Captains who disobeyed orders faced beheading. Deserters had their ears sliced off. Anyone who raped a female captive was executed on the spot. Most remarkably, she demanded that 20% of all plunder be placed in a central treasury to support the fleet, provide for injured pirates, and bribe officials. The pirates now operate with more organization than the Emperor's own navy, wrote a British sea captain in his 1809 report to the East India Company. Under her leadership, the Red Flag Fleet expanded to 6 distinct squadrons, each flying different colored banners. She appointed loyal commanders to each, creating the first pirate admiral's staff in maritime history. Her flagship became the center of a floating criminal empire that would soon stretch from Taiwan to Vietnam. The prostitute, who had once been at the mercy of any paying customer, now commanded the most powerful naval force in the South China Sea. And she was just beginning. Reign of Terror. The morning fog parted to reveal a merchant junk trying to slip through the narrows near Lantau Island. Within minutes, 3 red flag vessels converged on their prey, moving with the synchronized precision of wolves. No random chase or chaotic boarding here. Jung Yi Sao had revolutionized the attack. Each vessel had assigned roles. The smallest ship blocked escape, the medium junk positioned for boarding, while the heavy war vessels stood ready to unleash cannon fire if resistance proved stubborn. A British naval lieutenant, observing one such attack through a spyglass in 1809, wrote with grudging admiration, "The Chinese pirates execute their assault with a discipline that would not shame a European man of war." Most merchant captains surrendered without firing a shot. The Red Flag's reputation preceded it. Those foolish enough to resist faced a choice: total destruction or punishments designed to terrorize future victims. Captured captains might have their feet nailed to the deck before being beaten, while wealthy passengers were ransomed back to their families, often minus an ear or finger to expedite payment. What distinguished Zheng Yi Sao's operation from ordinary pirates was her strategic vision. Rather than random plundering, she established a sophisticated protection racket across the Pearl River Delta. Fishing villages paid regular tribute in exchange for being spared raids. Merchant houses purchased safe passage tokens, small wooden tablets that, when displayed, protected vessels from her fleet. The coastal economy adapted to her shadow government, with entire communities becoming dependent on her predation. The Qing imperial court, finally recognizing the existential threat she posed, dispatched Admiral Kuo Lang with a fleet of war junks in 1808. The resulting Battle of Lantau became legendary. Zheng Yi Sao lured the imperial vessels into narrow channels where her smaller ships could outmaneuver them, then closed the trap. By sunset, 15 imperial ships had been captured or destroyed. According to Portuguese accounts, she had the captured admiral's ears and nose cut off before sending him back to Canton as a living message. The Qing court, humiliated, placed a price on her head equal to the annual tax revenue of a small province. Merchants from Macau to Manila now lived in a world where a former prostitute wielded more maritime power than the emperor himself. The maritime economy. A vast shadow economy flourished in the wake of Zheng Yi Sao's fleet, transforming the entire South China Sea into her personal marketplace. By 1809, she had established what Europeans might recognize as a maritime mafia, a complex network of informants, smugglers, and corrupt officials that extended from coastal villages to the imperial court itself. Her operation went far beyond simple piracy. In captured ledgers later studied by British colonial administrators, her accountants tracked protection payments from over 300 fishing villages and settlements. These communities paid not just to avoid raids, but for access to smuggled goods, tea bypassing imperial taxes, European weapons, and opium flowing through the region's veins. "The woman pirate has created a shadow government," wrote a frustrated Qing magistrate in a report to Beijing, "where honest merchants cannot operate without her blessing, and dishonest ones grow fat under her protection." The floating city that formed around her flagship represented the heart of this maritime empire. When not raiding, her fleet gathered in secluded bays where temporary markets sprang to life. Contemporary accounts describe these gatherings as floating bazaars, where stolen silks from Canton might be traded for smuggled firearms from Portuguese Macau. Here, her administrative genius shone brightest. She established fixed exchange rates between various currencies, settled disputes between captains, and maintained warehouses on small islands where goods could be stored until prices rose. Her network of informants, fishermen, lighthouse keepers, and harbor prostitutes provided intelligence on merchant shipping that allowed her to strike with uncanny precision. The British East India Company estimated that by 1810, nearly 20% of all trade goods moving through the South China Sea passed through her hands at some point, either as plunder or taxed contraband. The brothel girl who once served at the pleasure of sailors now controlled the economic lifeblood of the region, collecting tribute from governors and colonial administrators who publicly denounced her while secretly filling her coffers. In the shadowy world between empires, Zheng Yi Sao had become not just a pirate, but a maritime economic power without precedent. Domestic life on the high seas. Chang Pao entered Zheng Yi Sao's life as her late husband's loyal lieutenant. He emerged as something unprecedented in pirate history, a consort to the admiral. Their marriage in 1808, performed aboard her flagship amid the thunder of celebratory cannon fire, cemented her authority through a partnership that defied Qing dynasty norms. According to a British hostage later released from the fleet, Chang Pao, 15 years her junior, addressed her not as wife, but as commander in public settings. In private, they forged a relationship that balanced power with surprising domesticity. Their living quarters aboard the flagship combined military command center with family dwelling, where strategy meetings might be interrupted by the preparation of traditional Cantonese meals. "The woman pirate keeps order in her cabin as strictly as in her fleet," wrote a Portuguese missionary who spent 3 months as her captive, "with maps and weapons alongside silk cushions and porcelain teapots." The Red Flag Fleet's floating society operated under rules unlike any shore community of the era. While the Qing Emperor's court restricted women to subservient roles, Zheng Yi Sao's code granted female captives and crew members unprecedented protections and opportunities. Women captured in raids could join the fleet as equals, with several rising to command their own vessels. Those who declined this offer received separate quarters with strict prohibitions against harassment, violations punishable by immediate execution. The most remarkable document from this period, preserved in British colonial archives, details her schedule of family regulations distributed throughout the fleet. These rules established everything from marriage procedures, requiring the woman's consent, to pregnancy provisions, excusing expectant mothers from combat duties while maintaining their share of plunder. Children born within the fleet received education in navigation and combat alongside traditional Confucian classics, creating a second generation of sea bandits loyal only to their floating kingdom. By 1810, her floating city housed not just hardened criminals, but entire families living beyond imperial control. A maritime society that represented the most successful challenge to Qing authority in a generation. Enemies on all sides. By 1810, Zheng Yi Sao's dominance had become intolerable to both the Qing dynasty and European colonial powers. The emperor, facing unprecedented loss of maritime tax revenue, appointed Admiral Qing Ting with extraordinary powers and a fleet of 60 war junks reinforced with European cannon. Simultaneously, the Portuguese governor of Macau dispatched 6 armed brigs, while the British East India Company committed 4 frigates to the hunt. 3 empires now chase a single woman across the sea, noted a bemused American trader in his journal. The resulting campaign became a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Rather than engaging these superior forces directly, Zheng Yi Sao employed tactics that naval academies would later study, dividing her fleet into smaller, faster units, using local knowledge of shallow waters where larger vessels couldn't follow, executing lightning raids before disappearing into the labyrinthine island chains. When Admiral Qing's fleet finally cornered a portion of the Red Flag Fleet near Lantau Island in April 1810, her response was ruthless. She sacrificed 4 ships as burning decoys, driving them into the imperial formation while her main force attacked from behind, capturing 3 imperial warships and sending the rest fleeing in disarray. The European efforts fared little better. The Portuguese campaign ended in humiliation when Zheng Yi Sao's fleet captured the governor's nephew during a coastal raid, returning him unharmed with a mocking note suggesting the governor attend to Macau's defenses before challenging the mistress of the sea. The British pursuit turned catastrophic during the typhoon of July 1810, when her fleet, trained to navigate local storms, found shelter while 2 British frigates were dashed against coastal rocks. Most remarkably, she turned these enemies against each other. Recovered Qing documents reveal her agents spread rumors that the British were secretly supporting her, while simultaneously her envoys whispered to British captains that imperial officials were in her pay. By autumn 1810, the Allied pursuit had devolved into mutual suspicion and recrimination. A Portuguese observer marveled that the pirate queen has defeated 3 navies without fighting a decisive battle against any of them. Her legend now extended beyond China, with naval dispatches from London to Lisbon speculating on how a former brothel worker had outmaneuvered the professional naval forces of 3 empires. The South China Sea had become her chessboard, where admirals and governors moved according to her design. The undefeated admiral. In January 1810, at the height of her power, Zheng Yi Sao made the most unexpected decision in pirate history. A Portuguese merchant vessel, returning from her flagship under a flag of truce, carried a message to Governor-General Bai Ling of Guangdong Province. The pirate queen was willing to negotiate surrender. The imperial court initially suspected a trap. This woman had outmaneuvered their navies for years. Yet the message came as Qing forces faced mounting crises, Mongol raids in the north, treasury depletion, and now British demands for expanded trade concessions. As recorded in imperial archives, Bai Ling received secret authorization to negotiate, promising only that the female pirate must accept punishment for her crimes. What transpired over the next 3 months revealed Zheng Yi Sao's most brilliant victory, one achieved without firing a single cannon. She arrived at the negotiations not as a supplicant, but as a head of state conducting a peace treaty. British diplomatic records describe her entrance into Canton Harbour aboard her flagship, accompanied by a flotilla of 20 heavily armed vessels, a show of strength that violated surrender protocols, but which officials dared not challenge. In the governor's palace, she presented demands that stunned imperial representatives: full amnesty for all her officers and crew, retention of all accumulated wealth, and a formal title for her husband, Chang Pao, in the imperial navy. When Qing negotiators balked, she simply rose to leave, reminding them that resuming war would cost the emperor 10 times what peace would cost him now. After 6 tense weeks of negotiation, she achieved the unthinkable. Almost every demand was met. On April 18, 1810, the largest pirate surrender in history took place as 7318 pirates laid down their weapons, keeping their loot while receiving imperial pardons. Her final masterstroke came when her husband, Chang Pao, received a commission as lieutenant in the very imperial navy that had hunted them, with responsibilities for suppressing piracy. The woman who had terrorized the South China Sea, now retired wealthy, respected, and entirely legal, the only pirate admiral in history to defeat not just imperial navies, but the emperor's negotiators as well. Epilogue: Legacy of the Pirate Queen. Madame Zheng settled into respectability with the same strategic brilliance she had once applied to piracy. Purchasing a handsome estate on the outskirts of Canton, she established what colonial documents discreetly called a gaming house, but what amounted to an intelligence hub at the crossroads of empire. British merchants, Qing officials, and Portuguese traders all frequented her establishment, where the hostesses, many former pirates themselves, gathered information worth far more than the house's considerable profits. Behind this legitimate facade, she maintained a shadow business in rare goods and specialized smuggling. A Dutch trader who knew her during this period wrote that the former pirate queen's network extends invisible fingers through every harbor from Manila to Singapore. When her husband Chang Pao died in a naval engagement in 1822, she attended his imperial funeral dressed in formal court attire, the former terror of the South China Sea now receiving condolences from the same officials who had once placed a price on her head. Her death in 1844, at approximately 69 years of age, passed almost unnoticed in official records, a single line in the Canton Registry, noting the passing of a widow of good family. The Qing dynasty, embarrassed by her victories, systematically erased her from naval histories. European accounts, filtered through Victorian sensibilities, reduced her to exotic footnotes about Oriental female pirates. Only in the oral histories of coastal villages did her true legacy persist. Stories of the prostitute who became admiral, who defeated empires and who rewrote the rules of power. When modern historians finally reconstructed her story from scattered documents and naval archives 2 centuries later, they discovered the most successful pirate in maritime history had been hiding in plain sight all along. In the ledgers of empires and the memories of coastlines, Zheng Yi Sao left an indelible mark, proof that history's most extraordinary stories often belong to those whom official narratives tried hardest to forget.